Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Plaw.
Welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Plaw, at Andrew Plaw Tech on socials. Very exciting episode ahead of us today, where we're going to talk with Sean. But before we get to that, we got some bills to pay. So, hey, folks. Take the 2025 State of System Administration Survey to share your insights on the IT industry, including cybersecurity trends, salary ranges, AI, and the best IT tools. Link to that will be in the show notes. Let's welcome our guest for our interview today. Welcome back, Sean Wheeler, lead or head documentarian at Microsoft, doing all things PowerShell, always out there in the community. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Should we spill the beans? We might have already had this conversation about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Some guy, some host of some podcast accidentally deleted all the footage. So we're here again. And we were in person last time, but now we're in the comfort of our own homes. I got more coffee than I had last time. It is what it is, right?
Yep.
Got to roll with the punches. But I appreciate your flexibility in joining again. And we got a lot of stuff we want to talk about. We want to talk about what's new in PowerShell. Project Mercury came to life, and it's called AIShell. I want to hear about that.
Yeah,
we'll talk a little bit about SpiceWorks or SpiceWorld, which was a conference we went to a couple weeks ago. James Petty was there as well. Shout out. A lot of good PowerShell content there, which was cool to see. Maybe there'll be more next year. I don't know. Well, we'll talk about it. I can't spill the beans. We're going to have an AIShell demo, though. Audio listeners, you'll have to miss out on that. It'll be on socials and in the YouTube version, which will be linked in the show notes. But Sean's got some cool stuff, and I'll be honest, I've seen it, and it is exciting. You will nerd out with me, and Sean will lead the way, because there's a lot of good documentation there. But Sean, what's up with PSResourceGet? I hear there's a new RC.
Yep, RC2 dropped in the past month, and the big addition there is, besides some bug fixes, they added support for the Microsoft Artifact Registry. That's where we publish all of our Docker images and such. But and really the big news, the latest version of PSResourceGet adds all kinds of functionality for different kinds of repositories. So you can set up private repositories in GitHub Artifacts, in Azure containers, in third-party NuGet servers. Just lots of different options there for you. So exciting stuff happening there. The RC2 version ships in PowerShell 7.5 preview, and I think they're trying to go GA at the same time as PowerShell 7.5 with the PSResourceGet. Don't hold me to that, but I think that's kind of the plan, is they want the latest bits out there when we ship the new version.
That would make sense. I do have a question about it. So we got PowerShell Get, we got PSResourceGet, which is the new and improved version, and it sounds like going forward, the version's going to be getting all the new support and all that kind of thing. As someone who's used install module, which is from PowerShell Get, they've been using it for a while. Is it time, at least for our personal workflows, to move to using PSResourceGet and install PSResource for installing modules? Has the time come?
Well, if you're using 7.4 or 7.5 version of PowerShell, it's already there. PSResourceGet is already there, so you should definitely be using it instead. There's a command in the module that actually I wrote that converts your PowerShell Get registered repositories to the new PSResourceGet registered repositories. So it makes it easy to move over your existing repositories, and to start getting used to the commands. I know that the team is working on a compatibility module. They haven't released it yet. There's a preview version out there. If you really search for it on the gallery, and it's basically proxy commands for PowerShell get that you use the old PowerShell get command, and under the covers, it's calling PSResourceGet commands in place of that. Like I said, that hasn't officially released. It's been kind of stalled out because they've had other priorities to work on. But the switching over is not really that difficult. So get used to it.
Yeah,
it also performs a lot better too. So you'll see improvements there.
So it is possible that in the long term, if people do miss this window to start calling install PS resource, they may be able to just keep referring to install module. And as long as their targets are up to date and they have some compatibility module that might exist, they'll be good to go. No guarantees, but yeah. If you're on the cutting edge, if you're the type of person to listen to a PowerShell podcast, if you're the type of person who has PowerShell 7.5 installed as you're listening to this, you should probably just use install PS resource.
Yep.
Awesome. What's your take on Windows PowerShell versus PowerShell? Like, what do you think people should be using day to day?
Well, if you can, you should be using PowerShell 7. I use PowerShell 7.5 as my daily driver and have since, probably Preview 2 daily. So, I mean, it's been very stable during the whole development process. So there's been a couple of bumps along the way, but very minor stuff. And I've rarely find myself needing to go back to Windows PowerShell 5.1 for anything. There's the occasional module for doing very specific Windows things that you have to switch back. But for the most part, the Windows compatibility layer that's built into PowerShell 7 handles all of that for you for the most part. So, like I said, if you can, especially on your own workhorse machine, that's what you should be using. You can make arguments about whether you should do that on servers in production and whatnot. That's really up to the policies of your organization and how you want to manage that. But the time is now to move forward. That's where you get all the cool features that we're going to talk about anyway.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff. And if you're, again, interested in PowerShell at all, you definitely should be on the latest version so you can have things to talk about to other PowerShell people. You're going to hear all the cool stuff they're using. Might as well get to take advantage of it as well and be able to share your perspective in the form of GitHub comments. Oh, hey, people get afraid by the whole GitHub thing, but it exists, and it's a great avenue for you to grow as a professional and a PowerSheller and however you view yourself. But speaking of GitHub, new PowerShell 7.5. There's some cool new stuff in it. What's going on with 7.5?
Yeah, so 7.5 RC1 released at the beginning of the month, and
the November month or the December month?
Beginning of November. I had to remember where we are.
We exist in the future as well.
Yes.
Out later.
So yeah, and not a lot of changes in the RC from the previous preview, but there is a lot of new features in 7.5 that you should be taking a look at. Tons of contributions from the community, which we always appreciate. 2 new commandlets, convert to CLI XML and convert from CLI XML. We already had convert to and convert from. No, we had import and export CLI XML, but we didn't have the convert commandlets. The difference is
convert from.
Yeah. So the import and export CLI XML commands operate on files. You export to a file or you import from a file. The convert to and convert from work on the pipeline. So it outputs the conversion to the pipeline so that you can use them that way. but yeah, there's a whole list of improvements. Check out the What's New in PowerShell 7.5 document. Links in the show notes, I'm sure. And since this is RC1, that means there will be no more changes, only bug fixes at this point. This is getting ready for release. And actually, the PowerShell team supports it in production. Prior to RC1, they were saying don't use it in production, use it in testing. But now they say with RC1 you can use it in production, and they want your feedback if you find anything. I would expect a GA release sometime after the beginning of the year. No dates that I can talk about yet, but it being the end of the year, we're already into December, and all of the holidays and everything. It's probably not going to happen until January.
Cool. A lot of fun stuff there. And I'm looking through it. And I know you're very active on GitHub. You're very experienced. I think a lot of your work takes place there. How active are you on PowerShell issues? Are you kind of sort of reading them or seeing them as they trickle through the team, or where are you with that?
Well, I actually participate in the interactive working group with the PowerShell team. So for issues that get labeled as interactive, for the interactive working group, we meet and discuss those, and talk about what should happen with them, and so on. So I look at those. I don't outside of that, I don't get too involved. I have plenty of work to do in my own stuff. I do make occasional commits to the PowerShell code. I recently updated all the help info URIs for all the modules, getting ready for the 7.5 release, so that updatable help will get the latest stuff. And I've been known to fix a bug or two here and there in different things. There was a bunch of, I did a bunch of work in PSResourceGet in the early days. Filed a lot of bugs there as I was testing it to write the documentation. So heavily involved in that.
I have a slight tangent.
Yeah.
I'm looking through. So there's an awesome doc that is going to be linked in the show notes. It's What's New in PowerShell 7.5. There's one for 7.4, 3, 2, 1. But I'm looking through some of these contributions, some of the community contributions that are listed. It has like breaking changes, improvements, new commandlets, all that kind of thing. You know what I'm seeing a lot of? Like,
what's that?
A very heavy influence by one particular country. You know what country that is? If you had to guess.
The UK?
Australia. We got Jay Borian. We got Armon. We have...
Are they Australia?
Yeah. Yeah, Jordan Borian, he's from Brisbane. Reducted is from Australia. Armon is from Sydney, Australia. So just interesting to see so many Australians. Such a tiny country, well represented in the PowerShell world.
Yeah, a bunch. Jordan, one of his recent contributions was he improved the performance of array addition.
Yeah, the plus equals thing.
The plus equals, yeah. Big improvement there. And so you need to be running 7.5 and to get that. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And it was cool because that sort of was a community thing that took place. I think it was initiated in the PowerShell Discord, aka.ms/PS Discord. And there was sort of a thread where he was on it. Matthias, also known as IAS Reset Me, and some others, maybe Jacob, were all sort of working away at that. And it turned into a pretty awesome improvement that we all get to benefit from, which is why you should be on the latest version of PowerShell, not on that old. We want that new.
Yeah. And speaking of latest version, I do want to mention PowerShell 7.2 is no longer supported. PowerShell 7.2 and 7.3 have both reached end of life. So if you're running one of those versions, you need to upgrade to at least 7.4.
Yep. Get up to date. Shouldn't be too hard these days. But I think it's time to talk about what I'm very curious to talk about. You know, you have a coworker, Steven. You know Steven?
Steven, Mr. Booker, yep.
Yes, Mr. Booker, the wine aficionado, Microsoft PM extraordinaire. Well, he came on here a little while ago and talked about something that made, I said it so many times because there's very few times where I feel so cool. He talked about something called Project Mercury. And I was like, whoa, well, we got project code names. I feel like I'm in the inner circle a little bit, but that has transpired and kind of improved over the months. And he was just at Ignite.
Yep.
And he presented on it. You want to tell me a little bit about this AIShell?
So Ignite, they officially announced AIShell, which is the product name for Project Mercury. And it's not like we've been hiding it. He's talked about it in public forums a couple of times. He demoed it at PSConf EU this past summer. But with the announcement at Ignite, we actually had like an installable build. You didn't have to build it yourself from source code, and we have documentation for it now. And when I go into my screen sharing, I'll show you the documentation a little bit. So for those of you listening to the podcast, you'll have to find the video later.
Yeah, we can switch into that pretty soon. But just generally, what is AIShell before we dive into the demo?
What it is, and this is not strictly a PowerShell thing, but it's created by the PowerShell team. It's a new shell, has its own commands in it, but it's specifically for interacting with AI models or other assistance providers. And it's modular, so you can, it ships with 2 agents for 2 different AI models that you can communicate with. And there's a framework for creating your own. In fact, in the documentation, we have documentation for creating your own agent for Ollama. And Ollama, if you're not familiar with it, is an open source AI engine that you can run on your desktop. So you don't have to have Azure accounts to do it. And it's only going to be as fast as your local resources allow it to be. But it'll take advantage of your GPU if you have one, and you can choose small or medium-sized language models so that it's a little lighter weight. But or you could write an agent that just is hard-coded to know answers to certain questions, and it becomes an assistance provider. It's sort of shell agnostic, but it depends on the AI you're talking to and whether what shell language you ask it for answers in, and then you can of course copy those answers and paste them into your shell. But the cool part comes with its integration with PowerShell, which I can show you. Shall we hop to the demo?
Yeah, let's jump into it.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so I'm showing the web page here for the documentation for AIShell. Now, we need to get this documentation published for Ignite, and so right now it lives in the PowerShell namespace on learn.microsoft.com. We will be moving this content to its own URL, hopefully pretty soon. So this is subject to change, but there'll be redirections in place. But it explains what AIShell is and how to install it here. There's an article, how to install it. And you can run it on Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, but you only get the integrated experience on Windows and Mac OS because it requires a terminal that allows you to do split panes. And there's just no standard terminal on Linux that we can count on. Also, to install it on Linux, it's a manual install. For Mac OS and Windows, we have an install script here that you can run that's in the source code repository, or you just download the zip from the GitHub releases page and you unzip it and run it from there. There's also an AIShell PowerShell module that you'll want to install. And that gives you the integration. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. You can see I've got Windows Terminal, and I'm going to import the AIShell module. And if we do git command on the module, you see there's 3 modules. The start AIShell is going to kick off AIShell for us, and you can see it creates the split pane, 80-20, 80% for PowerShell and 20 for AIShell.
Can you maximize that size? Window?
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, so there's, like I said, there's 2 agents you can choose from. OpenAI, GPT, and Azure. So both of these require Azure. And if you choose the OpenAI GPT, there's more configuration you have to do to get it connected to your instance. I'm going to use the Azure agent, and this uses Copilot in Azure to generate the answers to your questions. So it's trained with all of our all of our Azure documentation. By default, it's going to answer in Azure CLI commands. And so let's just ask it a question here. Help me create a storage account. And it's going off and talking to Azure Copilot, and it's come back with the example here: AZ storage account, create -- name, and so on. And you've got placeholders here for the parameter values you need to provide. Well, you can do /replace, and it will prompt you. So let's give it a name for storage account. My storage account, and some random number. And now it's logged into your subscription as your user account, so it knows what resource groups are available. You can choose which resource group you want to use, and then you can choose from the list here what location you want to create this in, and then you choose your SKU here for the last one. And now it's going to regenerate the command with those values. And I can do the /code command with the post subcommand, and it copies that over to the PowerShell window. So now I can just come over here and hit enter, and it will run that command for me.
Boom. Just like that.
Just like that. I can also... let's take a look here at the other commands. If we do /help, you can see all the / commands that are available in AIShell. If you don't like the answers that it's providing, you can say /dislike, and that gets reported back to the AI model. Or you can use /like. With the code command, /code, let's do help. You can copy, if you get multiple answers, you can tell it which answer. I want the first one or the second one or whichever, the last one. You can save it to a file, or you can, like we did, post it to the connected PowerShell session.
Yeah.
So that's the basics of it. There's you do a /agent list, and you can see the agents that are available. There's a /agent config command, and that'll open the config JSON file for the agent, so you can put in your information. Especially helpful if you're doing OpenAI. You need to give it your access key and your endpoint information. I don't have that set up for my subscription right now, so I can't really show that. But yeah, it's pretty slick.
Awesome. Yeah, that is very cool. Now, I have a question, because you mentioned there's some OLlama set up, and I do see that, how to create an agent for OLlama. My impression of Stephen Bucher is that he loves OLlama. Like, he loves products that are sort of flexible like that. Who wrote
Yep.
that documentation? Did he give you a starting point? Like, how did that transpire for the OLAM?
Yeah, he and I worked on it together. Well, most of the code was, I believe, written by Dongbo Wang on the PowerShell team. He's really the engineer behind AIShell. But I know Steven's done a lot of work in there. I know he had his hand in some of the code as well. And he gave me rough drafts of a lot of the documentation, and I rewrote a lot. But yeah, it's been a group effort between Steven and I to get this stuff published.
And it is definitely a tool that, well, if you're out there listening, definitely check it out. Check out the documentation. It's pretty easy to get up and running, configure things. And if you don't want to spend anything, don't want to connect it, maybe just want to play around on your own device, check out the OLAM agent. You want to check it out for other purposes. There's some awesome flexibility there. And I'm curious to see how the tool ends up as the years go on. Because this is a great interface.
Yeah, the OpenAI agent, I believe you can use it to connect to other OpenAI ChatGPT instances. So you could do ChatGPT or any other third-party AI engine that uses the GPT interfaces.
Okay.
It's a matter of configuring the right endpoints and keys.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's AIShell, links in the documentation. I have a workflow question because you mentioned working with Steven a little bit and Dongbo playing his role as well. What does that collaboration look like? Are these just Teams messages? Are you all actually hopping on and pair programming? Is it all like formal meetings where there's other people just sitting there? What does it look like to collaborate?
Yeah, we have the occasional meeting. I didn't really work with Dongbo much on this stuff. I know that Steven worked heavily with them. For Steven and I, we had a couple of Teams meetings, but it was just about planning and things like that. The rest is we do it through Teams chats and through GitHub collaboration, where he's submitting PRs for docs and I'm reviewing them and editing them and that kind of stuff. And I run into questions as I go along, and I have to ask for clarification to get the docs right, and it's just typical back and forth.
Yeah. What percentage is async versus live collaboration?
Oh, I would say 80%.
Yeah, which it's good that you all have some reliable tools to help.
Yes,
that everyone's pretty well versed on.
Well, and we're spread apart so much. I live in Texas. He's in Washington, in Redmond. We're all over the place.
Yeah,
different time zones. So you got to work async.
Yep, for sure. Now I want to say alluded to it in the beginning. We didn't allude to it. We straight up said it. We were hanging out a couple of weeks ago at SpiceWorld.
Yep.
We interviewed in person. Things went awry. Somebody forgot to press record. I don't know who that could have been. But how was SpiceWorld? How was it for you? I know you gave a bunch of talks.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of speaking lately. In October, I was out in Raleigh for PowerShell Saturday. Had a couple of sessions there. Did a half day with Stephen Judd himself, and his demos all worked. And then for SpiceWorld, I had a couple of sessions. I did a 3-hour workshop with co-presented with James Petty, another MVP, and our CEO of the DevOps Collective, the folks that put on the PowerShell Summit. So he and I did sort of was half beginning and then half a deep dive into PowerShell stuff for that 3-hour session. And then I did a separate breakout where I talked about using Git and GitHub in PowerShell, and he had a talk about SSH and PowerShell remoting using SSH.
How was it?
Yeah, great. We had a great time. It's a fun conference. It's as conferences go. You should check it out. It's cheap. Early bird is like $500 range or cheaper than that. I forget. It's especially for those newer in their IT career. It's or working in a smaller shop where maybe you're the IT guy. It's a great conference. And Austin's a fun city, so
And if you come, you get to see
I recommend
Sean.
Yeah, and we're talking about for next year having a larger PowerShell track. So that's still in the works, but we'll see.
I might need to submit next year. If we're sponsoring a conference, I typically don't submit, so I can be like available hands-on. And it's honestly a little stressful to do the stand at the booth, talk to customers, and present.
Yeah,
but I mean, your guy likes PowerShell a little bit, so
yeah,
it's always fun.
Well, and maybe we can co-present and take off some of the load. So something to think about.
Hey, we got a year.
Yeah,
maybe a little less. But yeah, definitely highly recommend if you're in the Texas area. Really finding any conference in your area is going to be a step above not going to anything. Even going to user groups versus not going, that's a huge difference in the level of community and support that you have. So highly recommend people taking actions on those things that are going to be beneficial, but maybe haven't gotten around to it yet.
Absolutely.
I think we met some awesome people. I think Preston. Preston was a long-time PowerShell user. Apparently been using PowerShell for 12 years. Has not engaged in the community, did not look outside his box the whole time, and it was kind of eye-opening for him. I think he went to your session, and we ended up meeting up with him several times throughout the week. That's really wild to see.
Yeah, and I mean, he didn't even know about the PowerShell Saturday in Raleigh, and he lives in South Carolina, not that far. It would have been an easy drive for him. So I think he's actually going to try to come to some Research Triangle PowerShell user group meetings going forward. We'll see.
Yeah, I'll have to circle back with him. I connected with him afterwards. But yeah, I mean, it's the type of thing where if being in the community versus not in the community, you get so many easy wins. There's so many projects you would have never heard about. There's so many features, commands, whatever. There's a lot out there. Allow the community, and if you're part of it, you're part of this as well. Allow them to sort of curate what's helpful for you on some things, because there's a lot out there in the IT world.
Yep,
it's always changing, which is really exciting in some ways, but also it can definitely burn you out if you don't take a step back, breathe.
Yeah.
But you mentioned PowerShell Saturday in C, and I got to see you there as well. I'm surprised we didn't podcast while we were there. It felt like we did. I guess we didn't.
Well, you recorded some sessions, some bar sessions with other folks, but you were busy. It was a day and a half.
Busy day and a half.
Yeah, you were plenty busy. So
yeah. Hey, and we knew we were going to see each other in Austin.
Yep.
But that was fun. I got to meet your wife first time, and I told her, you know how much we love Sean. And she said to me, "Oh no, I don't know how much you love him, but I know how much he loves you all." And it's so cool to have that appreciation and to be so involved in the community. Because I feel like over the past 3 to 4 years, I've really seen you flourish as someone in the community. Like just the number of friendships, the number of just the vibe you bring is so positive and infectious. And I think it's more so than it would have been 3 years ago. But how's that journey kind of been for you as you're increasing your community engagementness while also working at Microsoft and balancing all these things?
Yeah, well, it's been intentional, that's for sure. I love teaching, and I mean, that's kind of how I got into this job of writing the documentation. And there was actually, for several years at Microsoft, I was a trainer. I started my journey at Microsoft in 1995 doing telephone support for Windows networking, Windows for Workgroups, Windows NT 3.1, 3.5, LANman, that kind of stuff. And at any rate, I over time started teaching technical classes internally in our support group, and did that full time for 3 years, where I traveled back and forth across the U.S. to the 3 support sites: Charlotte, Las Colinas, here in Texas, and Bellevue, Redmond, Washington. I also got to go to Sydney, Australia twice, and Tokyo twice, and Seoul, South Korea, and to our office in the UK. So that was a lot of fun. And then later I was a premier field engineer, and I was delivering classes to customers as well. I taught scripting and initially VB scripting, and then PowerShell scripting. So, getting involved in the community is just another way I can give back and do that teaching. I'm looking to do more of this public speaking. Maybe Tech Mentor coming up in August. Well, before then, it's going to be PowerShell Summit in April. I know I'll be doing some stuff for the on-ramp program. And I've submitted a couple of sessions of my own. We'll see if those get accepted.
Yeah, good luck. I'm in the same boat. Fingers crossed. We'll see.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out, I will be able to just attend. But it's always fun.
And I'm looking at that, when I'm ready to leave Microsoft, that I would go into teaching classes, PowerShell classes, and doing the speaking circuit more. So
yeah, that'd be fun. It's a rewarding career. You've been around, you've taught in person, now your documentarian life. It's kind of a fun journey to learn from and emulate in some ways. I think in particular, the community engagement side of things. I mean, how has that felt? Has it been rewarding? Has it been worth the extra effort? Because it is extra effort. It's not your day job to go above and beyond like this.
Yeah, but I love it, especially when I hear back from the community about how much they get from the docs, how much they appreciate that. And I think they're always sort of surprised or to put a face to the people behind the docs. That's hopefully what I'm helping bring to this. That this, Microsoft's a very big company, and people look at us as this huge monolith, but it's really just, it's individuals like me and my writing partner Mikey and Mike Robbins, that we're the ones doing the documentation for PowerShell, and we want your feedback. We love to hear from you, and we love to share our knowledge. So there's real people here responding to your questions and complaints.
That has been something that I've learned. It took me like maybe 8 or 9 years into my career, but I eventually realized that, these places actually are just ran by people. So sharing feedback in a way that's actually constructive can be helpful. Not saying all companies are in a place where they actually act on feedback, or all teams are empowered to, but a lot more than I thought before actually care about feedback, which is wild. Things that I pay for, things that I don't pay for, IT related, not IT related. It's been a perspective changer for me. But as a documentarian, right? So you write docs, and you obviously do a lot more than that, but let's focus on the doc writing aspect of thing. That is an impactful thing, right? You're training people, you're giving them sort of a baseline thing. But nowadays, as we saw with AIShell, not only are you training people, but you are also training models, like in the instance of those Azure commands, right?
Yeah, our documentation is what's used to train those models.
That's just sort of an added benefit, right? You're already writing the docs, now you get to feel even better, like you're helping even more.
Yep. And and I do more. So, as you've mentioned several times, I call myself a documentarian because I technically, my title is principal content developer, which would be at most other places a tech writer would be the job title. But the job is so much more than just tech writing technical documentation. In my position, at my level, I interact with the PowerShell team directly. They treat me as a member of their team, even though I don't report to the same management structure. And I'm contributing code in some cases. I do a lot of testing. I'm reviewing things that they write. So if they write documentation or blog posts or whatever, I'll often review those. I have to curate the content and organize it in a way that it's presented in a logical way. I have to figure out blogging is one style of writing, and it's very personal, and it's very first person. Documentation is we write in third person perspective, and there's a fine line between what you put in documentation and what's better for a blog post, and being able to separate those things. Or we also on the Learn platform have training modules, and there's some things that are better suited to be explained in a training module where you have sort of guided step-by-step and a sandbox to play in and things like that. So there's all kinds of different modes of consuming information, and I kind of have to operate in all of those spaces. Plus, I'm also sort of setting the standards, the editorial standards, style guidelines, quality guidelines for PowerShell documentation at Microsoft. I don't own all PowerShell documentation at Microsoft. I document the PowerShell code that the PowerShell team supports. But there's all those other modules for Windows and for all the Office apps and Azure and all that. There's different writers for all of that stuff. And in some cases, those writers are more subject matter experts in the product, but not PowerShell. So I have to help teach them about PowerShell and how to write PowerShell documentation properly, and help them create examples that are more idiomatic to PowerShell, and not so batch file oriented or program C# style, and so on. So it's a fun job, and there's always a challenge. So I enjoy it.
Well, you seem to always rise to the occasion. So, and the PowerShell community is happy to have you, man. So we're all benefiting from your work regularly. But it's time for some questions, some plugs, some things. Okay, you've been here a couple times before. You know how the kind of show goes, just a little bit. We're putting a little twist on it. All right, I'm not going to ask you your 3 favorite modules. I'm going to ask for some very specific things. Thing number 1. Name a module that you'd like to plug. Something newer that you've been using, maybe something you're passionate about. What's a module?
So I initially had one, but I thought of another.
You can do 2. You can break the rules.
Before we started, yeah. So the first one is a shameless plug. It's a module I wrote called PS Style.
That's a good one.
And if you've used PS Style and PowerShell 7, that's $PS Style is the built-in variable in PowerShell that helps you with ANSI escape sequences for colorizing your output, and it has all kinds of great features built into it. Check out the about ANSI terminals article for more information about that. But you have to be on PowerShell 7 to take advantage of it. And it'd be nice to have in Windows PowerShell 5.1. Well, that's what my module does. It gives you the PS style variable for Windows PowerShell 5.1. So your profile script, the profile script that you write to set up your environment and do all your custom color settings and everything, can run both in Windows PowerShell or in PowerShell 7. You just have to load this module. So that's my shameless plug. The next one, I think we talked about this at SpiceWorld. We've dropped a new preview version of PlatyPS, which is the tool we use to generate documentation for PowerShell. And this has been a long, painful journey of at least 5 years or more that I've been fighting. And we finally got some traction and some amazing work from Jim Tour just before he retired. He retired at the end of October. He did a total rewrite of PlatyPS, and now it's the old one was a hack project written by one of the devs on the PowerShell team who's no longer at Microsoft, left years ago. And it was never meant to be a production tool, but it got used in production. And it's been long overdue for some love. It was very file oriented. It created markdown files, and it would read markdown files and convert them to the MAML format, which is the format that GetHelp uses in PowerShell. But it was all file-based. The new version of it is very much a PowerShell workflow model, where it will still create the files and everything, but you can do this all in a pipeline now, where you can pipe the output of one command to the input of another, and build this conversion pipeline. And it's so much faster. It's amazing. You should check it out. It's in the gallery now as a preview version. The module is named Microsoft.PowerShell.PlatyPS, so it can be installed side by side with the old version that's just PlatyPS. We did that intentionally. The version number on the old one was 0.14.2, and now this is a 1.0 release, but it's preview 1. There's some bugs that need to be fixed. We're still working on that. But this is the tool that we're building for our own use internally, our own docs pipeline system. But it's something that you and the public can use to create documentation for your own modules. And it's really slick.
Is it fair to call yourself an advanced PowerSheller if you've written a module and you've used PlatyPS for the docs at all? I think it's fair, right?
That's probably an advanced use case, yes.
It's a good goal to have. We can all work towards it. There'll be a use case. If you're not there yet, keep writing your tools, maybe put them into a module, maybe put it on GitHub, maybe add some little CI/CD and kind of wrap things up nicely. And by the end of it, you're not only considered an advanced PowerSheller by Sean Wheeler, but you'll have a ton of skills and you'll be able to interact with a different community on the GitHub side of things and really have the power for the current age that we live in.
Yeah, I'm looking to do an extended length session either at PowerShell Summit or maybe Tech Mentor, where I take you through end to end, creating documentation for your module, publishing it in HTML from the Markdown or in MAML format from the Markdown, including hosting updatable help. Mike Robbins and I did a version of this presentation at PowerShell on the River a couple of years ago. But I'd like to hit a bigger audience with it and especially using the updated version of PyDPS. Because it's not that difficult. You can put together your own documentation, stand up a static website using Hugo and GitHub pages, and have updatable help and online help for your commands.
Hard to go wrong with that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for IT teams generally to use GitHub more in source control in general, whether it's GitHub or not, like for config files outside of just PowerShell. So cool. Yeah, you got my creative juices flowing over here. All right, you get to plug something. You get to plug anything you want. It could be work related. It could be whatever, but it's your chance to plug something.
Oh, gosh. Those were my two big plugs.
What about some good docs you've written? Is there something you're particularly proud of? It doesn't have to be recent. It could be long-term. Like anything. It could be a song.
Well, okay, docs. There's some docs that some folks may not be that familiar with. In the PowerShell docs site there on Learn, if you go under Learning PowerShell, there's a section for optimizing your shell experiences, and there's a couple articles there about configuring a light colored theme and improving the accessibility of your output in PowerShell. If you're someone who uses a screen reader, and just generally ways to customize your PowerShell environment. I do a presentation on this in some of the user groups, and I did it at SpiceWorld about customizing your environment with your profile, and a lot of it's based on these articles that I've written here, but it really gets into PS readline and all the fun hotkeys that you can create and all the color settings that you can do. And I'm working on a module that allow you to switch between colorized themes in your terminal and your shell settings. One of the difficult parts about all of this is there's at least two different places to configure colors. Your terminal application can have color themes that you have to manage, and then your shell, and within PowerShell there's $PS style, and there's PS readline options that control different colors that you can tweak. And so I've got a proof of concept that's working, where you create a profile that defines your shell settings and can discover your terminal settings and allow you to switch them independently. So
cool.
But yeah, check out that documentation there. Accessibility is a big point of interest for Microsoft, and we have information there about choosing accessible colors, so that if you need high contrast colors, or choosing colors that have enough contrast so that they're readable for people with different vision capabilities.
And last question. Sean, it's been a pleasure. We've chatted, we've gone places, and you know what? It's not our first time going there, because we've had this convo before. But what is one message that you have for the people out there? It can be PowerShell related, career, work-life balance, whatever you got top of mind. Share your message.
Well, I would say first, get involved in the community. PowerShell, unlike any other technology that I've ever worked in my career, almost 40 years now, that PowerShell has an amazing community of helpful people that want to help and are very open with their sharing. There's no gatekeeping, or very, very little gatekeeping. So the PowerShell Discord, find a user group. There's you run one, the Gainesville group, and Research Triangle PowerShell user group, the Pacific Northwest PowerShell user group, all meet online, so you don't have to be local to attend. And then the other thing is something that the community really encourages you to do is share your knowledge, share your learnings with the community. One of the things I learned as a professional trainer is I learned the content the best when I had to teach it to someone else. So, sharing that is your opportunity to be the teacher. And it's not hard to get started. The user groups are a great place to start. And it's even if you're just sharing, hey, this is something new I learned and what I got out of it. It may be something that everybody else already knows, but you're sharing a life experience that gives you a connection to the rest of the community. So,
and
just get involved.
That's a great piece of advice. And I'll say that these PowerShell skills don't exist in a vacuum. They inform many other parts of IT, and they can give you insights and different approaches to how you approach solving problems. It's not just like, oh, I'm really good at writing this language that only I use. No, this can have a drastic impact on your organization and your career. And you want some evidence? Listen to all of our interviews where we talk to people about how it's changed their life, myself included. It's going to be worth it. Spend the time, learn PowerShell. You're in the right place. Join the community. Listening to the podcast is amazing, and I thank you for doing that. But it's time to start sending some messages, start making some friends, because the stronger we are, the bigger we are. I don't know, the more stuff we can do. There's something there. But thank you, everybody out there.
Yep.
And if you get involved in the PowerShell community, let me know. I'd love to boost whatever you're doing. You're speaking at a user group. If you publish your first blog post on how to run Git help, whatever you got going on, keep us informed. Thank you, everybody out there. What's up, Sean?
I was just going to say, if you are interested in blogging, but don't want to have to figure out how to set up your own blog, we also host the PowerShell community blog. And I'll send you a link to put in the show notes for that. But it's a WordPress blog that we host, but you provide the content, and we will help you with the writing and the editing. So that's another way to get started and see if blogging is something that you want to do more of. We can help you get started.
It's a really good opportunity. I highly recommend those of you out there, take them up on that. That is a really cool resource. If you're the type of person who's trying to take your career to the next level, you're going to have to start taking action and taking ownership of the opportunities that are out there in front of you. And there's a lot, because we are all trying to make PowerShell in the community as good as it can be. And so awesome. I'll have links to that in the show notes. Thank you, everybody out there. Walk safe, drive safe, do whatever you're doing, do it safely. If you liked what you heard, if you like PowerShell, if you're feeling the vibe, if you're excited right now, like I'm excited, well, go ahead and hit like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Maybe leave us a 5-star review, 5-star, and recommend it to your friends. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Sean, we're worldwide. We're everywhere, man. PowerShell's everywhere. It's cross-platform, all the good stuff. Thank you, everybody out there. And thank you, Sean.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.